Welcome back. Welcome in. This is Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com, part of the Paramount Podcast Network. I am Mike Casazza here finally for the first football game preview episode of the season. This will not be abbreviated because there's just too much to discuss here. Too big of an opponent, too big of a venue, too much on the line this season, if not in this game. To help me out, Chris Anderson. Chris, back in the saddle. How does it feel?
Feels good. It's feel like this season stuck up on me a little more than maybe past seasons, even though Penn State is obviously a very big opponent. It's a big game. Last year was a big season opener too. But I don't know. I think it's kind of caught up in what was going on with fall camp and thinking, yeah, it's coming in a couple weeks. And then all of a sudden you start getting the um, promotional emails from all the sports books saying, hey, reminder, season's about to get started. Let's go. I was like, oh yeah, we got to get on game week, Mike. And, running pretty smooth so far. Got a lot of content on the site, and this will just add to it for sure.
Pretty smooth. I see what you did there. It's the longest off season. Like it's forever. It's like 270 days ago they played a game. And like it's the busiest off season too because there's so much stuff going on too. So it's this interminable time between games, but there's so many things that happen. You kind of get dizzy. I don't know how you did it, Chris, though. You made it to game week without a depth chart. This is now becoming a thing. Some coaches are just opposed to it. Some coaches will do what the other team does. Some coaches just do their own thing. And just to give you different ends of the spectrum here, Alabama, I don't know if you caught the Nick Saban news conference, but saying that they're not going to do depth charts because the media makes too big of a deal out of it. Again, that's kind of projecting, telling the media what they're actually doing. I'm not sure how many people are sitting in there going, yeah, you know what? You're right. I do that. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Texas Tech coach Joey McGuire. It seems like, again, that program seems like it has the most fun, and it's probably from the top down, but they have a YouTube program where they reveal the depth chart. And then right in the middle, you have like Neil Brown and James Franklin just staring at each other, like with their hand on the gun in the holster, but not either one of them is going to pull it out yet and show what they're going to do. This is such a strange thing. I don't know what you think about it, but I want to go over some predictions with you, if that's all right with you.
For it.
Starting quarterback, I'm going to say you're going to go with Garrett Green, right?
Yep.
Starting right guard.
That's where we disagreed, right?
Yeah, but like, what do you think here?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, regardless of who the starter is, I think they're going to do the same similar rotation as they did last year, when they were splitting time at right tackle between Yates and Hubbard. And again, I was leaning towards Hubbard just based off of kind of going all the way back to spring when they had an opening at center and they decided to move Yates there and give Hubbard more time. But it sounds like Yates has been getting a lot of time at first team right guard too during fall camp.
Mm-hmm. We know who the X, we know who the Z is, probably know who the tight end is. Inside receiver, slot receiver. I'm not too sure, but I'm not too concerned about that. Go to defense. Will linebacker Jordan Leslie says they're just going to play him and figure out who's hot or who's the most reliable in that game and go. But rather than asking you who's first out there, maybe you say that, but who do you think is the one that ends up with the most significant or the most period playing time?
This is probably the hardest one for me to choose and maybe the most worrisome because of none of the three have experience. None. Um, Even if you expand that out to four and say Tariq Austin Cave like sliding over from the middle, there's no little to no experience in any of those four players. And the idea of, hey, we'll just kind of figure it out as the game goes along. Maybe that works if Duquesne was week one, or like, somebody like a MAC team was week one. But when you're opening against number 7 Penn State, that's troublesome, worrisome. And I still have no idea what the answer is going to be there. I mean, I'm assuming based off of what you were reporting and talking about, maybe Trey Lathan, but yeah, I don't feel good about any of these choices.
Yeah, I wonder if you start him or if he plays a lot. I just feel like that's the guy that in this gunfight here, where there's going to be talent out there, that you got to have a talent who can run around. And I think of the three options, him, Jaido Favoris, Ben Cutter, maybe Tyreek Austin Cave, who, by the way, has not played, then he's probably the guy that has the highest ceiling. Maybe he can just run around and fit athletically out there, but he's got to actually literally fit into what they're doing. And can he do that? We'll see. I don't know. Starting cornerbacks. They're going to play 4, maybe 5. Who are the first 2?
I don't know if maybe this is not crazy, but it's something that I was going to touch on in our little preview of Penn State here in a few minutes. So maybe I'll go ahead and spill it now. Beanie Bishop. I mean, they've talked about him kind of being the alpha. Um, the game last season where he played the most snaps in the regular season at Penn State,
Hmm.
and he ranked as while the team got carved up. I mean, part of that was like turnovers from the offense, and I think the game ended up being like 45-17. But it was through no fault of Bishop's, who finished the game with like a PFF grade near 80 and a coverage grade of 77. He allowed only the Penn State threw for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns, but with Bishop in coverage, they got 7 yards against him.
Hmm.
He's been there, he's done that, he's played there. I would lean on him if all else is equal, or maybe even if it's not, I would lean on him to be one of the starters, and then probably turn my attention to um, Montre Miller or Andrew Wilson Lamp at the other spot.
Yep, I'm with you. I like Miller as one corner. I like Bishop as the other. Here's an asterisk, though, because there's an injury to discuss. Don't know how severe it is because they're not going to tell us, but Neil Brown says no starters are out, maybe some backups. And if there are players out there, it's going to be just backups. And Aubrey Burks, of all people, said that Marcus Floyd has not been practicing, has not been around. That was on Monday. Perhaps he practices later in the week. I don't know, but something there. If he can't play, he is your backup free safety. He does not factor into what happens in the slot, but maybe an Anthony Wilson or more specifically a Keyshawn Cobb does. Keyshawn Cobb can do a little bit of everything back there, including play that nickel. I really wonder if a personnel thing happens, whether it's on the first snap or at some point down a distance situation, whatever, if you don't see Bishop slide inside and play the nickel because he might be the next best there. And if you're shorter in the safety, it might amplify that need. Just something to watch. Don't know what's going to happen. Chris, I will not quiz you on starters and the special teams. I have all the answers if you want to catch me on the VIP board because that's how I roll. The game itself.
On the Ear Sports Plus VIP board.
Ear Sports plus ST special teams. Trademark that, by the way. So there's ST and then TM. It's very convoluted. 9 wins, 48 losses, 2 ties, and West Virginia is 3-31 at Beaver Stadium. That is a .088 winning percentage. This is a long time since they played. The last game was 1992. The last game at Beaver Stadium was 91. West Virginia last won at Beaver Stadium. Boy, you really got to go back and try to find this here. And actually, I have the note and I can't find it. Been quite some time, but they don't play very often. They could play more often than they do. Maybe that is something that comes out of this because they'll be in Morgantown next year, but I'm not sure what the longevity here is. 1954, last time that West Virginia won at Penn State. Back-to-back wins, by the way, 53 and 54. Hardly played in Morgantown back when the series was starting. 7:30 p.m. NBC. It's the first Big Ten game on NBC as part of the TV contract. It's a whiteout, or it's a helmet. I forget what they're calling it. It looks like it'll be pretty cool. Whiteout, except a section of the fans on each sideline side, will be in blue, so it looks like a helmet stripe. That'll be cool for the blimp. But biggest crowd ever, quite likely to see the Mountaineers play. Chris, what do you think? Opener, so many transfers, so much discussion about this game, and again, so much on the line for the season. There's surely pressure just about a regular standard opener, but there's a showcase again for West Virginia, not new to it. 3rd time in a row they've opened the season on the road. Is there any type of value added or lost? I don't know, preparation, execution, scoreboard, based on the circumstances involved with this game?
I don't know if it helps West Virginia for this game, but I think it does. It might help them moving forward as far as like, hey man, it's never going to get any harder than this. There is no other venue or game on the schedule the rest of the way where you will face anything even remotely close to, 106, 107,000 fans on a Saturday night, Penn State, top 10 team, and whiteout, all or striped stadium, excuse me, or helmet stripe, whatever they're calling it. There's nothing they're going to face that's going to be anywhere near this. So you get through this, and then you can look at them and say, down the road, you travel to TCU, you're like, hey man, it's a noon game against number 20 TCU, in Fort Worth. There's going to be like 38, 40,000 fans in the stadium. It's not going to be anything like what you've already done. So you've done it. You've had the hardest part. It's behind you. Let's move forward and let's get it done.
I say that, but I remember our post game podcast after the Pitt game last year. We both pegged this team to be. Did we both have 6-6 last year?
Somewhere around there, six,
Yeah.
7-5, I might have said.
Okay. And then after the game, we're like, wow, this could be a team that actually overshoots it a little bit. And maybe they do go 7-5 or 8-4. Who knows? They certainly are better than what we saw based on the opponent and the venue of the first game last year. Boy, were we mistaken. So got to be careful on this one right here. Granted, they beat Penn State. Watch out because the expectations will run wild. And not without validation, because this would be a heck of one. This would be an all-timer for West Virginia. I mentioned this too. 3 straight years they've opened with a true non-conference road game. That has never happened before in the history of West Virginia football. That should never happen again. That's just too much for the fan base, especially when you lost the first 2. And just to be frank, the expectation is they will drop to 0-1 for a 3rd straight year. That is not great scheduling right there. There's certainly different ways to do that. It'll end next year, but boy, you'd like to not start off on the road 3 straight years. It just gives you one less thing to look forward to, especially if you come home with a loss there. Let's get into the matchups, Chris. We'll start. We can flip a coin here. Do you want to go offense on Penn State or defense on Penn State first?
Let's go West Virginia on offense and Penn State on defense, because I'll be quite honest, like that's probably where like I'll be spending the least amount of my time talking is on that side of the ball.
Okay. Okay. I'll probably be doing that too. Neil Brown, again, didn't have a depth chart. I don't know how he did this, but he said that Penn State has 9 draft picks and they're too deep on defense. I tried to do it. I got to 7 or 8, stretching a little bit. The 9 was a crapshoot for me. But again, this is a team that has recruited pretty well in defense and is going to develop players just because of the way that goes up in Happy Valley too. But they do have impact people at all 3 levels, and maybe if you want to call like the safety position a 4th level, all 4 levels there. But defensive line, linebacker, cornerback especially, and now safety, they do have people who can affect the game. It's going to be a fitting challenge for West Virginia. I'm not talking about Penn State. They're number 7 in the country for a reason, but a lot of it is that they have talent, they have depth, they have ways to affect the game on defense.
Yes, they do, and in a big way. And that's going to be one of my keys and my key matchups here is kind of how West Virginia's offense, Garrett Green, everybody really can take care of the ball and control things, because that defense wreaks havoc. We talked about the havoc rate and turnover luck and all this other stuff. Penn State forced so many fumbles last year while also intercepting a ton of passes. And they were one of the best in the country in turnover margin, one of the best in the country in takeaways. And it reflected in their games. In their 11 wins, Penn State's defense had 25 takeaways. That's over 2 a game. In their 2 losses, they only got 1 interception. That was it. One first forced turnover in 2 whole games, and they lost both of those contests. And in their 11 wins, they had 25 takeaways, and that includes a couple games. I believe it was at Northwestern. I think I was looking up something on, and I mean their offense turned it over 3-4 times to a 1-11 Northwestern team, but Penn State defense forced 5 turnovers of their own. So that defense can wreak havoc, and they do it in a variety of different ways, and it's just always seems like it's attacking. And those turnovers can rear their ugly head, and which would not be great for an offensive West Virginia that's trying to kind of mesh and gel around the new quarterback.
Yeah, West Virginia's defense, conversely, I know we're talking about Penn State's defense, West Virginia's offense, but the Mountaineers, 10 takeaways last year. So a double and then half of that is what Penn State did. Overall for West Virginia, -8 on turnover differential, Penn State +11. Give me +12. I'm looking at this wrong. Yeah. So again, that's an opposite number there. 20 turnovers separating one from the other. Will it be the same this year? I don't know how much the ball will be in the air with Green, but certainly he'll be running a little bit. Got to be careful because you're right. Forced fumbles last year. They were very good at that too. They have some personnel just holistically that is impressive. If you look at how you line up a defensive line, they're going to go end, tackle, and I think you're going to see some funky stuff there. They have some pass rushers. They have linebackers who can put their hand on the ground here too. this is where I kind of begin looking at things too. You're absolutely right. The variable there about the turnover margin, takeaways, key. But we get into mano a mano stuff here. West Virginia's offensive line, pretty good. About to see how good they are because they're going to see, again, just the holistic approach. They're going to see good talent, but I think you're going to see Manny Diaz doctor the lineup a little bit. They have a couple of really good rush ends. Could they have an even front with three ends? Could they have an odd front with three ends that are playing? Just because they want to get that pass rush personnel on the field. The best thing West Virginia could do is avoid third and long here in this game because they have, guys who will pin their ear back and come. But are there individuals, are there matchups that you're looking for here where, that guy's on the edge. He's not usually there. They got a couple of speed rushers in here on 3rd and 9. Anything there that makes you stand out, whether it's individuals or combinations.
I'm glad you gave me the option of combination here, Mike, because you just said West Virginia needs to avoid 3rd and longs. Penn State, or more precisely, Manny Diaz, defensive coordinator for Penn State during his time at Penn State and Miami. And this is, I'll give credit to their official website. It is right at the top here that defenses under Manny Diaz ranked in the top 10 every year since 2016, since he became a defensive coordinator at Miami. They've ranked in the top 10 in tackles for loss every single season since 2016, which, given the turnover, COVID, him going from linebackers coach to defensive coordinator to head coach, back to defensive coordinator, changing schools, COVID, changing personnel, all that stuff, it doesn't matter. His scheme and the way he wants to attack on defense is going to create negative plays, which is going to make it very difficult to stay out of those 3rd and longs that you mentioned. And I think that's my biggest concern, because if Garrett Green and this whole new fresh corps of wide receivers are facing 3rd and 8, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 12, it's going to be a very, very long night for West Virginia.
Yeah, to underscore this, 26 conversions on 105 third downs of 7 or more last year, including, now granted, some of that's going to be skewed by runs. So opponents were 4 for 38 first downs on a 3rd and 7 or more. Okay, fine. You're going to pass a lot more when it's 3rd and 7. Well, guess what? Penn State knows that. 22 first downs on 73 3rd and longs last year, too. They have the personnel to do it up front, but also in the back end. We'll get to their cornerbacks, I'm sure. But listen, West Virginia's offense is going to play, has a plan, has some toys I think they want to take out in the field and see what they can do. This game is not going to start off 70-0, so the Mountaineers do have a chance. Where do we begin to solve this Penn State personnel puzzle?
One area that I liked West Virginia's chances against this Penn State defense, and again, well, we're I don't want to say we're throwing darts with a blindfold on here, but without a depth chart, we're kind of using projections from our Lions 24/7 site and other sites, trying to figure out who's going to be playing for them and what's going on. But from what I can tell, Penn State will be starting, like you said, two ends, 2 tackles on the defensive line. And those 2 tackles in the middle, Akeem Beeman grades out really well overall, according to PFF, but his tackling grade is a 26.3. Right beside him, Devon Ellis, 55.4 overall grade. And then you go right behind them to the presumed starting Mike linebacker, Kobe King, 55.9 overall grade. And you're talking about that middle of their defense. I hate to use the term soft because I'm pretty sure any one or all 3 of them could just pummel me into the ground. But that is where, you look at the PFF grades and you look at the tackling grades and missed tackles and all that stuff, and it's strong everywhere except for those 3 guys. And some of those guys were in bit parts last year, 300 snaps instead of 600. So I'm curious if that middle of the defense for Penn State is susceptible to, say, a very large and very athletic running back like CJ Donaldson running right up the middle at them.
Interesting. Their rush defense last year was bizarre. And just if you take away one game, which I understand you can't do, but if you take away one game, in 13 games, they allowed just about 1,000 yards. 12 games, just about 1,000 yards. However, Michigan ran the ball 55 times for 418 yards, 7.6 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns, 41-17 win. But again, take that away, 12 games, about 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. So they've been very good at times, but some big numbers. Utah 184. Minnesota right after the Michigan game where things are maybe exposed a little bit, 165. Low yards per carry in that one though. But I don't know if there's tape to study about Michigan because they're so darn, I don't want to say unique, but just Michigan's personnel and their approach on offense is probably hard to mimic. I'm not sure you do that, but man, that was such an outlier for them that you figured there was something there that could be exploited and exposed. And how much time do you give that? I'm not really sure. That will be one to watch for sure. And that's been their question mark in the preseason, too. If you read some of the clips from the papers and especially the 24/7 site that cover them, a lot of players, a lot of the coaches say, yeah, we just don't know yet about the collective worth of the defensive line. Individually, great talent, great recruits. They're going to bank on some players as being better this year than maybe they have been before. Maybe they're young and they're just getting up in the system, but they're going to need some of those things to happen because they just kind of have that giant arrow pointing over your head. If you're going to pick a spot to go after him, that's going to be one of them. Watch for a guy like Jordan Vandenberg, guy from Johannesburg, South Africa. Didn't play a ton last year, but that's one of those off-season champion guys. And if he gives them something in the middle, 6'3", 310, super strong, that could be a guy that makes a difference in the game and kind of closes that gap that you're talking about. Maybe that's a place that West Virginia does want to pick at. Maybe he stands there and says, nope, not this year, because I'm standing in the way too. Receivers against cornerbacks. This to me might actually be the game. I just know that West Virginia is going to lean on the run as much as it can. And the differences, one way or the other, could very well come from matchups or just singular plays when it is West Virginia throwing the ball to its receivers against Penn State's cornerbacks. Penn State lost cornerbacks and safeties to the draft. Penn State secondary is probably going to be the best that West Virginia sees and could end up as one of the better ones this country. Again, not hyperbolic for the number 7 team in the country. It's not me talking up an opponent. It's because they have really good players back there. Where do we look on offense when it is time to throw the ball?
Anywhere that Kalen King is not.
Yeah.
Is that an acceptable answer?
By the way, starting linebacker, you mentioned Kobe King. Starting cornerback, Kalen King. I believe they're twins. That's a pretty good recruiting chip, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
Good luxury.
Yeah. But Kalen King, I mean, he grades out as I believe the second highest returner for Penn State this season. He is elite in coverage. His 90.6 coverage grade last season, allowing teams to only complete 45% of the passes in his direction. And he broke up 9 passes and had 3 interceptions in coverage while allowing only 1 touchdown. So, and again, we're talking here where he's kind of getting targeted because last year the other cornerback was Joey Porter Jr., who he was either the last pick in the first round of the NFL draft or the first pick of the second round of the NFL draft. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I mean he was elite. And so they're avoiding Porter to throw at King, and then King is putting up those kind of numbers, which is just kind of wild. So maybe this year you avoid King and hope there's not somebody that's just as good on the other side.
Which there might be. That's probably the problem here. Like they have another very good corner. Yeah, you're right. His coverage numbers are incredible too. I don't want to tip it all away. There's things we're going to write about, but in man coverage, he broke up forced incomplete passes on 41% of the attempts, and they play man about half the time. Granted, that's a good reason to play man when you have a guy like him. They'll mix it up, they'll do some things, but man, when you're forcing 13 incomplete passes, 41% of the attempts, you're doing something right in man-to-man, and that's not a guy who gave up a ton of plays there too. Elsewhere on there, matchups for West Virginia, the tight end situation, they could be big enough and fast enough a linebacker to run with guys, but I just feel like, Chris, you gotta see what you have on this one here. Like they talk about it a lot, maybe every year at West Virginia, but man, they got a guy who's just naturally open in the 6'7" Cole Taylor. They're gonna probably put 2 on the field a bunch. Do they have to? Will they incorporate tight ends here? And is that a way to maybe stay away from the corners, maybe get vertical a little bit if he's running with a safety or a linebacker and just try to make some splashes with the tight ends?
Mike, according to Ear Sports message board law, I am not allowed to talk about West Virginia throwing to a tight end until they have done it for at least 3 games in a row. I'm
So this
sorry.
is an open case then.
This is an open case. I got to see it to believe it. I mean, you're right. They talk about it every year, and Cole Taylor has everything that you're hoping for in a tight end. I gotta see it. I have to actually see it with my own two eyes before I believe it.
Okay. Joey Porter, by the way, number 32 pick, second round. And the other cornerback who's really good is Johnny Dixon, who's probably going to get drafted as well, too. So that's the long and short there. Anything else on that particular defense versus offense matchup for you?
No, sounds good.
All right. Now the fun. West Virginia's defense, which was talked about a lot and perhaps not the most flattering terms last year against Penn State's offense, which I think you can simplify, just not simplify, but you can certainly lock your stare into the backfield because their running backs are exquisite. And the quarterback, again, don't know who it is, but everybody is pretty excited to see Drew Aller play. Um, where do we start here? Because not great in the outside, tried to get some receivers in the transfer portal, got two that West Virginia wanted, except one that actually ended up at West Virginia. One did not. But just to me, it begins and ends with the two running backs.
Has to. I mean, they're two of the best running backs that West Virginia will face all season, and they're going to be in the same backfield, and they're going to be dominantly featured in this game. They are um, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. I mean, they are elite. I mean, everybody gets upset sometimes when we use the term elite, especially on our board and in some of our stories. But these two guys are elite. They are something special, and the most dangerous part about both of them, I mean, they got the whole package. They're nicely sized. They got good top end speed, good acceleration, good cutbacks, but they make you miss. And that's the problem. And that's where the biggest issue could be with this game because you look at Singleton's stats from last season, 34 missed tackles forced on 156 carries. One out of every five carries, he is making somebody completely miss him on a tackle. And he's not even as good as Allen,
Yeah.
who had 46 missed tackles forced on 167. So one every four carries, Allen is making somebody miss. That's how you go from like a 3 yard gain to a 12 yard gain or a 5 yard gain to a 50 yard gain. And that's where they kill you. Again, I wasn't completely sold on that offense at Penn State last season, but these two guys were special and they were the ones that made it happen. And a lot of those are just winning one-on-one battles in the field against linebackers and defensive linemen and even defensive backs and making a miss.
If you just counted Singleton's yards after contact last year, he would have ranked number 101 in the country in rushing. He would have had 715 yards rushing just after contact, 4.5 yards per carry after contact. That's pretty good. And it's not just making people miss. You're right. But you think making people miss, you're thinking Barry Sanders, someone who's very shaky. He's fast. He runs away from people. But boy, he runs through people. And that's one reason that West Virginia's coach have been adamant about wrapping up and running your feet through the guy. Because if you just wrap him up, he's going to run through you. Pro Football Focus tracks breakaway runs. Those are runs of 15 yards or more. He had 18 of those, and they accounted for almost 60% of his yardage last year. So he's been strong there too. They also got Trey Potts from Minnesota. He was a pretty good running back before he got hurt. That's pretty much standard for Minnesota, but it's a guy who's got like 1,200 yards in his career. He's their third running back this year too. Don't know if they'll get to him or not. Outside, they did not get Devin Carter. He ended up at West Virginia. He was committed to Penn State. They ended up getting Dante Cephas. They bring back some receivers too. Makes life a little bit easier for Drew Aller. That's who we expect to see out there. And again, this is a guy who kind of a sliced bread recruit at quarterback. They played with Sean Clifford for 4 seasons in a row. We started 46 out of 47 games. He was there for 6 years. Just a different type of quarterback, at least by appearances. Hearing West Virginia talk about him, just bigger and heavier, but has some of the same threatening abilities when it comes to tucking and running. Sneaky athletic, sneaky fast. Do you see that? Do you buy that?
I'm not sure I'm buying he's as big as sneaky as some of the guys that West Virginia has seen over the years. I do think he's got the arm talent would be something special. But we also have to remember, like, I don't know. I think when everybody looks at this game and they start talking about the quarterbacks, a lot of the outside experts, if you will, are saying, man, look, West Virginia's starting this guy, Garrett Green. He's like barely played. It's like, yeah, you guys do know that Drew Aller, like 60 passes in his career. Like he played as a backup sparingly last season in a bunch of games, but similar to Green. But that's it. That's his experience. So I think a lot of this is going off of recruiting pedigree, which again, I'm not one of those people. I'm obviously one of those people who believes in recruiting rankings, but it's not the end all be all. You do have to see it convert to college if all this will convert to college play, and we haven't seen it from him yet. So I think he's just as much as an unknown, maybe more so than Green, although his upside is pretty darn high given, what we've seen in the size and the arm strength.
Absolutely. One reason the Clifford in that offense was as good as it was last year, as good as they were last year, even if you, Chris, were not sold on them, is that he just thrived outside the design of the play. When he got pressure, he was pretty good. 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. He averaged about 11 yards per attempt on the depth of target. Hardly any mistakes. Again, 1 pick, only 5 turnover-worthy plays. He made things happen. His adjusted completion percentage was about 71%. So when he got pressured, he did things. Allard, I'm not going to give you his sample size. It's about the same, but young quarterbacks are often so programmed to stay inside the constructs of the play that they will either avoid getting outside of it, or when they do get outside of it, they're not as good. West Virginia's going to have to try to confuse them and pressure them. And can they do that with their pass rush, whether it's a bandit, whether it's defensive ends or combinations up front? Can they get into advantageous situations? Those 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 10s we were talking about, that's going to be a big thing. See what this guy has. Anything on Bo Prabula, or are you not expecting him at all?
I'm not expecting. I mean, I expect him maybe in similar packages as I might expect Nico Marchio. Just occasionally throw him out there for something, but no.
Okay. Finally, tight ends. Just going to mention them because like that's what people do when it comes to Penn State this year, it seems like, but they have two that I think that they like. Theo Johnson, I think there was a question as to whether or not he would play. He was in some off the field trouble this year, but he's also a team captain who's probably been on the straight and narrow since then. And then a person that has been mentioned by all the coaches for West Virginia as someone who really worries them because of his height, his speed, his athleticism is Tyler Warren. Those are both 6'6", 6'7" guys who are 250, 260. Not sure where they are as pass receivers, but Chris, if you look at the splits for where Singleton and Allen run, man, they go outside that left end a lot, which is the tight end. And your left side, your left guard, left tackle, tight end. If you're running pros out there, we haven't talked about that, but they have some pros on that left side of that offensive line. And you add a tight end out there who can do it, whether that's Johnson or Warren, that's dangerous. Just their team totals last year outside, they ran a ton outside the left, outside the right. Allen favored the left side, and Singleton favored the right side. So they do mix it up, and they're potent when they get out there. Those two can be receivers. They can stretch the field, but if they're going to run 12 personnel, they're going to create edges. They're going to create extra gaps. That's going to force West Virginia's second-level defenders to come up and be honest about it. And then from there, who knows what happened. But if they run the ball effectively outside, it's because of those tight ends, I'm sure. Also, maybe the All-America left tackle, but also if they're running it effectively, those guys are getting to the edges. That's going to maybe eventually create some play action issues or some moments where that secondary can't be honest. And then if you followed West Virginia football for any amount of time, you are perpetually in fear of a tight end getting vertical at the seam and getting open there. That's my spiel on tight end. Do you have anything you want to add to that, or have I said way too much on the topic here? It's a 3-game rule. I understand. I wasn't sure if it applied to Penn State.
You have cornered the market on tight end talk today. You got it.
All right. Here we go, Chris. We'll wrap it up here. Feel free to add anything that you want as we answer this last question. Tee it up as always. Game starts 7:30. Game ends, geez, I'm hoping like before 11. That'd be awesome. Right now, the games are checking in a little bit faster than before. These two teams figure to run the ball a bunch. I don't know if it'll get away with those run clock moments in the fourth quarter. We'll see. But eventually we'll talk after the game is my point. I'll be at Beaver Stadium. You'll be in Richmond. We will chat. Who and what are we talking about that contributes to the outcome here, whether that's a West Virginia win, an upset for the ages, or the Penn State, I would say, expected triumph in the opener?
I mean, skipping over the obvious of Garrett Green and quarterback play, I'm going to say if West Virginia keeps it close or pulls off the upset, the sneaky reason will be the defensive line. And I know I've said, hey, I'm worried about the defensive line because AJ Jackson said, they'll be solid, but he wasn't sure that they had, the big time playmakers kind of guys. Maybe that's exactly what you need against Penn State, a team that likes to run zone, likes to run zone read and outside zone, because so much of defending that is defensive line discipline, 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 discipline. Guys sticking to their roles, doing what they're supposed to do. If the ball goes left, I do this. If it goes right, I do this. And if they can stick in those roles, stick in those lanes, that'll help shut down that zone, the zone reads, help shut down those outside and inside zone runs that Penn State kind of lives on. And I think That's something I'll be watching very closely because it's going to take all of them. If just one of them doesn't hold true to what they're supposed to be doing, then there's an open lane, and those running backs are good enough to find it, and they're going to make West Virginia pay.
I like it. Absolutely agree. Probably could press end right now and wrap it up, but I can't possibly do that, especially when you have the right word for the last word. That's not good enough. So I'm going to step back a little bit and get a broader view here. And I think back to something Aubrey Burke said on Monday. He had a couple of really good things to say about the occasion, but also the fact that, listen, respect how good the opponent is, but just don't be afraid of them because, again, this is two college football teams playing in an opener. They've had a lot of time to prepare. So I wonder how much that applies to just everything at large for Penn State. For example, respect the running backs, don't fear them. So what you're saying right there about the defensive line, let me copy and paste that here. They're going to have to be the factors. When it comes to throwing at the cornerbacks we've mentioned, don't be scared of them. Like if it's man-to-man, don't be scared. That means guys like Bram and Carter, who was brought here to be our number one, have to excel. When it comes to the quarterback, yeah, he's a 5-star and he was a number 3 player and the number 1 quarterback in last year's recruiting class. Guys never played before. Don't be afraid to go after him. Like respect the talent because they've earned it. They're number 7 for a reason there. But 100 yards long, 53 and a third yards wide, 60 minutes, 6 timeouts, all that cliche stuff. I said it earlier in the week. It feels weird to say it again, but you can't be scared of this one here. You're not going to tiptoe into this. And if that means coming down to a 4th and 1 in a spot where a punt seems like a good idea, maybe going for it's a better idea at this point. Past sometimes is prologue and you don't repeat your history if you learn from it. So situations like that, I think may be bound to happen here, and they're going to have to figure out, can we throw at this corner man-to-man? Can we win on a 3rd and 2 on a run play that we know is coming at us? Can we pressure this quarterback and force a mistake? We're sure he maybe gets one off and goes over our head. They're going to have to take some chances. They're going to have to be the scarier team. They're going to have to do something that earns respect from the other side. I think that whether they do that or do that enough or do that well enough will be something that we probably discuss at the end here. Plenty more coming up on the website here. By the numbers, that's back. The fresh set, that'll be back. You have, Chris, at some point, answers from your questions on the Penn State site. You've got your 3 keys to the game. What else am I missing here that we can share with our listeners about how we are previewing the game?
I have a video pod with our Penn State site. Going to have a couple more things from Andrew Corbett leading up to the game. How to watch, a couple recruiting stories. Check out the midweek VIP buzz if you haven't seen it already. Long form recruiting notebook, basically.
A lot happening. A lot of reason to be excited. A lot of answers on the way. We will know more when we talk again after the game Saturday night. Until then, I am Mike Casaza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We'll talk to you then.